Good morning, everyone. We're going to give everybody a couple of minutes to join the webinar, and then we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for joining the presentation. We are hosted today by Amazon, AtScale, and Foursquare. Today, we are talking about how to merge places or point of interest data with additional data sets to make smarter business decisions. Thanks again for joining. If you're on the West Coast, hopefully you have your cup of coffee. You're ready to join with us. I'm Jackie Graham. I am your host for today, and I will be taking you through the presentation. I am part of the strategic sales team at Foursquare, and I focus on auto, insurance, media, and entertainment. But before we get started, I wanted to let you know you can submit questions anytime during the presentation. So you'll see a little questions button in your control panel, and you can feel free to send them throughout the presentation. It won't interrupt us, but we will answer the questions that we receive at the end of the presentation. So don't be afraid to send them during the webinar when you feel like you have a question to ask. Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Hi, my name's Tony Jacob. I'm the business development lead for the insurance industry at Amazon Web Services, or AWS. Been with AWS about 4 years now, and I've got a team largely based out of New York, and we look at the ways we can work with property and casualty insurers, life insurers, the reinsurers, and the large brokers globally.
Hey everybody, Daniel Gray here. I manage our sales engineering team and work with our field teams with a lot of different enterprise customers that are combining different types of data sets and implementing different types of use cases, which is some of the things that we'll be covering today. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the at-scale model. So, the theme of the webinar is really the ability to combine data sets and do analysis on those data sets. If you think about third-party data like Foursquare data, being able to take that point of interest data, the visit data, the foot traffic data, and combine it with your first-party data set, so your sales data, is extremely powerful. But at the same time, it can be very difficult because there's a lot of things that go into building relationships, building correlations between things. A lot of times there's a lot of friction with data engineering. You got to download files, all kinds of stuff that go into that. AtScale believes strongly in a dimensional semantic model. And what that allows us to do is basically pre-model data sets and kind of plug them in together so that when people go to do analysis on those data sets, it's just loading and using the tool that you want and just connecting in. And it's all live connections. There's no SQL, there's no data pipelines, no data engineering. You can do analysis immediately. And so if you tap into the Foursquare data, you want to quickly be able to understand foot traffic or POI type of data, You can quickly combine that with your data sets, make decisions, and then move on to the next type of question. And so that's what we feel very strongly is that is the at-scale semantic model that makes the analysis-ready data. And we'll show a demo of that towards the end of the webinar. So next slide, please, Jackie. All right, awesome. So this is the at-scale flywheel. And I think, you probably, if you've shopped on Amazon anytime soon, you've actually experienced the Amazon flywheel. So this is really about the ability to make better products, have more choices, and then increase customer satisfaction, and then widen the audience by continuously doing that and understanding. At-scale's got the same philosophy with data and analytics, and so I'm going to take you around the flywheel here, and ultimately we're going to talk about compound knowledge. If you have analytics that are feeding back into your system, you're going to compound your knowledge, you're going to accelerate, and you're going to make better decisions. But essentially, if you take a look at the flywheel here, you're going to start off with access. And we believe strongly in live data access. And essentially what that means is use the tool of your choice. It could be Excel, it could be Power BI, it could be Tableau, it could be Python. But connect live into data. Don't do extracts, don't downsample the data. Regardless of the data set size, just connect in live so that you can make decisions based on the whole breadth of the data. We talked a little bit about the at-scale model earlier. So this is really where we do our magic in making the data analysis ready. So there's no ETL required, no SQL queries. Just think about all the friction that usually comes with bringing in new data sets and trying to combine things. Those problems are essentially eliminated with the at-scale model. And again, you'll see that in the demo. And then get to analyzing. So at that point in time, instead of spending days or weeks trying to, bring the data together, just start analyzing from day one. This will allow you to tap into Foursquare data day one and start doing analysis versus, setting up a long ETL pipeline and things like that. And then ultimately consume. And the more people you have consuming, the faster you can run those analytics, the faster you're actually going to get those insights back. And we believe strongly that you should be feeding those insights back into your flywheel. So as you learn things, as different groups learn things, as different business units learn things, they're feeding it back into the semantic model, the at-scale semantic model, and then you can start to consume that through the access layer again and consume those. And you could be doing that with things like learning, through descriptive analytics, or you could have machine learning tools using something like AutoML and automatically, modeling back in predictions and features and things like that. And so as you implement this flywheel, you're essentially compounding knowledge and accelerating knowledge. And so we believe strongly in that, and we'll try to show you some of that through the demonstration a little bit later. Next slide, please, Jackie. All right, awesome. So let's just talk a little bit about this, and I'll try to put it in context of what you're going to see in the demo today. So at-scale is just a semantic layer between basically your data products, your data platforms, and your consumers. And if you look on the right-hand side here, we believe strongly that you should be able to analyze data in the tool of your choice. You shouldn't have to learn something new because it's going to slow you down. So if you're comfortable in Excel, if you're comfortable in Power BI, if you're comfortable in Python, whatever you're comfortable with, use that tool and accelerate. You're going to get one single source of truth because that semantic model everybody's tapping into. So if you define a dimensionality a particular way, like time and geo, or if you define a hierarchy a particular way, or you define a particular measure way, everybody's getting the same answer because you're tapping into the same semantic model. And then on the left-hand side are the different data sets. So at scale, pre-models out, third-party and second-party data sets. That way you can just snap them right into your first-party data. And here's just a list of some of the data sets that you can easily snap in with at scale. You'll be seeing today, what you're actually going to see is you're going to see Foursquare data. We have a public data set around flood zoning risk, and additionally a store sales data from a sporting store. So we're going to be combining all those. We're going to show you how that data is analysis ready using a bunch of different tools. All right, and next slide, Jackie. All right, so just wrapping up here, and then we'll turn it over to Tony. Really, if you think about it from the perspective of a data aggregator or someone who actually provides data sets, at scale can simplify the evaluation of those new data sets. As we talk to a lot of different companies, by the time people download the data, try to figure out how to import it into their tools, and then combine it with their data sets, weeks or months can go by before they understand the value of a data set like Foursquare. So at scale will allow you to tap into that value immediately. And you can, basically reduce your your evaluations. And again, it's all about the blending of the data, because as you bring more and more of these data sets together, the more and more insights that you can get. And as I said earlier, we believe strongly in bringing the tool of your choice so you're comfortable, you can work away right away. And then ultimately, like I said earlier, it's all about the feedback loop. So the things that you're learning should be feeding back into that semantic model so that other people can pick up that knowledge, accelerate, and just continue to expand that flywheel. Thanks, Jackie.
Okay. Well, thanks, Daniel. So I think what Daniel said is spot on, which is how can we remove the friction of making these disparate data sources available for your data scientists, or in the insurance business, the actuaries, the underwriters. And so AWS's role today is to talk about a relatively new service from us called AWS Data Exchange. It should come as no surprise to anybody on the call that there's just been an explosion in all these available third-party and external and unstructured data sources. And the fact that, researchers, data scientists, underwriters, they all want to incorporate these external and unstructured data sources, often to enrich the legacy or historical data that they have access to find those correlations, to find new signals on the customer. And it's not just obvious data like market data streams. It is location-based data. It's social listening-based data. It's crowdsourced data, satellite imagery, drone footage, sensor data from all the sensors around a plant, or the in-vehicle systems leading to usage-based insurance, or telematics, or pay-as-you-drive-based insurance. Next slide, please. And with this just explosion in all these third-party data sources, what customers have told AWS is that they want to be able to more easily find these data sources via the cloud. And they'd like to be able to access the data and ingest the data for their modeling efforts, like Daniel described, just as easily as you would visiting an app store, or going into an online shopping experience, obviously. So, broadly, to address the needs of the data scientists and the desire to enrich legacy or historical data with external and unstructured data sources, AWS at a very high level brings three things to bear. One is data lake technology. So the data lake really serves an important function because, as Daniel described, what it allows you to do is ingest all these data sources where there's no T in the ETL. You don't transform the data, you ingest it into the lake as is, and then you make it a target for your AI services. The second thing we bring to bear is a lot of services to help the data scientists more quickly build AI services and train and deploy those AI models into machine learning. So they're running against the data sets and they're self-learning. This is all the brain power that at scale brings to bear. And then the third is AWS Data Exchange. Like I said, it's a relatively new service, and it's intended to make it easy for your data science function, your underwriters, your researchers, to be able to find the data sources, subscribe to the data sources, and then be able to ingest those data sources into your efforts directly from the cloud. Next slide, please. For insurance specifically, and that's what my team and I focus on, this is definitely a topic of interest that we're hearing with insurers, with reinsurers, with the brokers we work with. One is the insurers are using data lake technologies to make their legacy data more accessible. It's often been a complaint in the industry that insurance historical data is often hard to access because of the legacy systems that data resides on. So insurers are replicating their data off of their legacy into lakes to make that historical data more accessible. But they really do want to bring in the external and unstructured data to add to and enrich that historical data they already have. And the reason why is, obviously because of the issues that insurance as an industry is dealing with and that are captured on these slides, the generational shift, the changing nature of risk, 10-year weather events happening every 3 years, cyber risk, you name it. But it's actually the two topics on the left that we're hearing more and more from insurance companies because of COVID, quite frankly, and the effects of the pandemic. One is that insurance companies across property and casualty, life, all the verticals, they need to be able to provide digital customer experiences to their policyholders and identify products that can be sold digitally. The obvious reason being, in a pandemic, right? You can't meet with your advisor, you can't meet with your agent, you can't meet with your broker. You don't send the risk engineer out to the plant floor or to the construction location. So if you can't meet physically, you need to be able to have a digital channel engagement with the insights behind it for digital experiences and products that can be sold digitally. And then the second is what's on the bottom left, and it's a very related topic, which is if you don't have your traditional data collection methods. So the obvious example, in life insurance, you can't send somebody for a blood draw, for the chemistry workup, to do the underwriting for a term life policy. Or you can't send, which is probably more relevant today in the topic today, a risk engineer to the site with a camera and a measuring device and a notepad to look at the risks on a construction site or look at the risks in that plant floor environment. What are the alternative data sources that your underwriters, your data scientists can bring to bear so that they can still accurately identify and price the risk? And that's what the benefit really of the AWS Data Exchange is in the context of insurance. It becomes a more discoverable repository of third-party data that can augment or even replace some of that traditional data that you'd be ingesting for your underwriting efforts, so that you can still accurately identify and price the risk. Next slide, please. And we're really seeing insurance companies and reinsurers and brokers ingesting this unstructured and external data, combining it with their legacy or historical data, and applying those insights across the insurance value chain, absolutely in improving the digital customer experience, not only because of COVID, but because of the desire to not compete on price, but compete on service levels and customer intimacy. Certainly seeing it in the claims process. How do you remove the grit in the claims process? Because as you probably all know, right, that's often the moment of truth in the policyholder to insurer relationship. And if you have a bad claims experience, you're going to leave for another insurance relationship. So how do you use data to improve that experience and that visibility for the customer, while also behind the scenes streamlining your processes, making your loss calculations more accurate, but also identifying fraud in claims and heading that off early in the process. And of course, we see the data being ingested by the actuaries as they're pricing better. They're having more accurate risk insights to set their reserving, or optimize their reserving levels to keep more of that money back in the business for investment. But really across the value chain, we see these use cases of artificial intelligence and machine learning, data scientists, and accessing and leveraging both internal and external legacy, internal and external data sets. Next slide, please. So today, if you go into the AWS Data Exchange, and it's readily available on the web, you'll find about 1,500 products, or more than 1,500 products from more than 100 providers. The obvious examples in insurance that you'd want to have access to: DNB, weather data, climate data, Verisk with the risk data, credit data, etc. Once subscribed to any of these data sources, what you do is you wind up using the AWS Data Exchange API to tag that data and be able to ingest it. And as the data gets updated, you're getting a steady stream. But what's great is you're using that API, and all your data sources are located on the exchange, and you're ingesting them all the same way. You also only have that one API to manage, and you even get a consolidated billing statement, and you're able to natively copy these data sets in a very streamlined fashion, right? We're taking that friction out of all that complicated ETL. And also the data providers are just bringing their business terms, their subscription terms into the data exchange. So your processes are just being simplified and everything's rolling up into one bill. There are also examples of a lot of other data sets that might not be relevant to insurance, but are relevant across a wide range of industries, to include retail, to healthcare, to manufacturing and supply chain, you name it. So we're really trying to fuel the ability for data scientists to more easily discover this data, ingest the data, and do the experimentation, because it's all about experimentation and fail fast or find these new signals that are going to lead to greater customer insight or greater accuracy and risk identification and pricing, or whatever the problem or the opportunity is that is the focus. But today, what we really wanted to talk about, obviously, is the Foursquare data that's available on the data exchange and how that can be relevant to many of these insurance use cases and in other industries. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it back to Jackie to talk specifically about the Foursquare data.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony. As you can see, the Foursquare data is available through the Amazon Data Exchange, per Tony's previous slide. If you're not familiar, Foursquare is a leading location data company. We started about 12 years ago with a consumer check-in app that many of you may recall. We later released other consumer apps like City Guide and Swarm. But our mission is to build the most trusted independent platform for understanding how people move through the real world. So our slogan is Foursquare everywhere. We actually have two types of data that we make available through the Amazon Data Exchange. The first one is our Places data set. We cover 95 million points of interest in over 200 countries. Our data comes from millions of consumers that have validated and updated core attributes for businesses like hours, location, parking details, things like that, which are kind of standard, as well as adding specific attributes like something has an ATM inside or only has valet parking available, or things like that that might be rich in context when you start to think about the ways that people travel. Many of the details that we have on our global POIs are curated by super users that have been using our apps for many, many years. And they love to provide things like tips and photos and key details about places that they visit. And these extra attributes are really the things that provide that rich contextual data about those POIs. We also have visits data, and that data provides high quality location-based data that helps you understand the way people move. So think about foot traffic, the way people travel to businesses, or if you're looking at who travels to your competition, those kinds of things would be available on visits data. Today, we're going to share some examples of how insurance carriers could use some of the data that we make available through the Amazon Data Exchange, but companies large and small use Foursquare data in many other unique ways. Having data to understand things like predictive modeling or helping make site selection decisions when you're thinking about opening new locations, understanding where your competition is, whether or not parking is available, et cetera, are ways that businesses can use our data to make smarter business decisions.
Jackie, apologies for the quick interruption, but your camera is covered. Perfect, thank you.
Now? Oh, sorry. At Foursquare, we focus on providing the best, most accurate data to our customers and partners. We definitely use a breadth of resources that we are focused on to ensure that our attributes cover what people need and want. So we've got 2 million updates per month and over 1 billion photos and tips provided by consumers and our data partners. It gives us a lot of data to cross-check and validate. We are constantly diving into that data to get more granular and providing more details on key points of interest to our partners. So some of the things that I mentioned before, what's the best thing to order at a bakery, or is there valet parking only available for that restaurant that you're going to go to? We have also done a really interesting weekly blog all year, last year, that focuses on the changes related to the way that people move related to COVID-19. So when you think about as we slowly closed down and then we were kind of shut down altogether, and then how the country has slowly opened up in different areas, we've provided feedback on how that has happened and how it has impacted businesses. And we've done that on a blog post, so feel free to check that out. But interesting information about trends that we've seen, how the world has changed, and things like that. When we think about our POI data, we focus on accuracy and scale. Because Foursquare has roots in consumer check-in apps, many of our users have been passionate about sharing their information for many, many years. The depth of their understanding and the rich contextual information has helped us to grow to where we are today. We also know that privacy is now and always will be a concern, and people are wanting to share their information, but kind of in exchange for what? What are they getting as a result of that? So we're very cognizant of that, and we feel that it's our duty and responsibility to have best practices around privacy. Last year, we merged with Factual. You guys may have read that in the news. We also acquired Placed in 2019, and last week we had an exciting announcement around the acquisition of a company called Unfolded, which is a next generation platform for geospatial analytics. We are committed to growth, and with these companies as part of the Foursquare family, we are now able to provide the most comprehensive data sets available. We have data on more than 400 venues, including categories that are just as specific as things like art galleries or types of restaurants. So you can drill down into an Indian restaurant or an Italian restaurant, ski lodges, things like sports venues, and you can drill down into not just a major sports venue, but you can go down into a baseball stadium or a football stadium. Our POI data has, 1 billion tips, photos, et cetera, and also can include detailed reviews. Our users are passionate about adding that information, and this information can further enrich the information that we're able to provide to our partners. We also have coverage in more than 200 countries, so we're confident that we have the data that you need. Today we heard Tony talk about how insurance companies are looking to use data to solve for some of their challenges. We work with companies in industries like travel and tourism, media and entertainment, restaurants, financial services, and the like to do the same thing. And so while we're using the specific use case of insurance today, we work with lots of other verticals to help them use data to make better business decisions and be efficient and effective. I thought I could maybe piggyback on Tony's ideas around how insurance carriers are looking for actual data sources and real-world perspective to mitigate risk, which we talked about in the very beginning. So typically they were using things like proxies for risk, so credit score or geo demo data that was perhaps more generic. And now they're looking to make relevant, validated business decisions based on the data that they're able to receive. So digital data, location-based data, et cetera. These are just a few ideas on how insurance companies can and do use POI data to assess risk. So some ideas would be, understanding surrounding businesses to get an accurate footprint of POI and evaluate for a business policy. Other carriers may use the data to make suggestions for their customers on ways that they might mitigate risk by installing devices that might help them to better understand when their business would be at risk. So things like water level indicators or fire sprinklers, and I think Tony talked a little bit about that. But those tools can help lower risk and maybe help avoid claims, which is all part of, obviously, policy pricing and risk analysis for insurance carriers.
Jackie, there's another benefit, which is, the photos, the imagery that the Foursquare users post can be incorporated for carriers. A lot of carriers are looking to go to continuous underwriting, or at least semi-continuous underwriting, where they can go in and double check or validate their underwriting assumptions they used when they priced the policy originally. And so this gives them ability to see what might have changed in that storefront or that brick and mortar location, or the proximity to other hazards, and just validate or give them a prompt that they might want to think about how they price that risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And in other verticals, we can use POI data to discover, that a key competitor is nearby and you may not want to, open a site in that particular location, or is there parking available during your peak office hours, or are you sharing a parking lot with somebody that would, potentially take all of those spaces? And so that data can help make better business decisions. And you can also pull in visits data. So we're talking kind of about POI today, but we can talk about pulling in visits data to better understand, how people are moving. Is that a popular corner? Is that a situation where you want to be there or you don't want to be there? Or do you better understand how people move? And we can think about that when you're opening things from a coffee shop to a car dealership. But going back to insurance, you can see how that Foursquare data could be really meaningful in terms of assessing, risk for the business policy. So one of the things that Tony mentioned was, using the photos. We think about that in terms of specifically the way COVID-19 has kind of changed the way that we're moving, but also the way that we're visiting businesses, specifically restaurants moving from wholly indoor to maybe wholly outdoor locations, putting up pop-up tents and having outdoor heaters, maybe having extension cords and power cords outside that they didn't have before. There's no way that an insurance carrier would ever know that. And they may be looking to, like Tony said, continuously assess risk or renew a policy. That policy can be wholly different today for that business than it would have been, 12 months ago. And so having those photos or understanding the way the business has changed can be really critical in terms of the way that those carriers are able to use the data to better assess risk. I think I mentioned on the previous slide, but didn't talk to it, we also can overlay on top of maps some information on, flood zone or fire risk, and have really impactful mapping to better understand the topography as well as the risk analysis for businesses that are looking to open in those zones, homeowners that are looking to seek policies in those specific zones, and how that might impact policy premiums. So knowing all the data is there is great, but how can you easily access it? And that's what probably all of you are wondering. So I'm going to turn it back over to Daniel. He's going to show us a real world example of how you can use the at-scale tools in the Amazon Data Exchange to pull in Foursquare location data.
Thanks, Jackie.
Yep.
All right, let me share my screen here. All right, there we go. All right, so let's start talking. Let's start with the data. As many of you are aware, if you go try to get data, typically you're going to get that. I mean, it may be exposed through a database. More often than not, it's probably files, possibly in like an S3 bucket. And of course, you have your own first-class data, first-party data that is in your own schemas, and you could have SaaS applications like Salesforce and CRM systems. But they're all modeled a little bit differently. And if you want to be able to do analysis on those data sets, there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that you model the data correctly, because if you don't, and you have everybody kind of doing their own thing, well, what's the odds of someone using Excel coming up with a decision in your business getting the same answer as someone that's using something like Power BI? They're going to get different answers. You're going to make different decisions. So, I'll just start real quick with the data. And if you take a look here, we have, basically these are the two data sets that were shared from Foursquare. This is basically the places data, and this is the business data. But we also had some flood zoning data and some other data sets that are all in here as just S3 files. On top of that, I've also got data in my own proprietary type of model. So this is, it's just nothing to memorize here, but just know that, if you have your own enterprise data, it's going to be modeled, for your enterprise. And these things are modeled differently. So what I'm going to do is, what the at-scale model does is basically combines all that data, and it correlates it in ways of conforming type of dimensions. But the important thing is, as an analyst, if someone is to go out and consume this data and make decisions based on, foot traffic or POI data, based on flooding zone data, you just snap right in and you go. You don't have to worry about any of this, behind the scenes. So let's just jump right into that. So kind of the flow of the demonstration here, as I started thinking about it and working with Jackie and Tony and the team, is, how do we tie something into one of the insurance use cases that Tony and Jackie were just speaking about, and just generally the data that we have out there. And so my thought was, well, hey, we have a first party data set here. It's really around an adventure store sells, a sports store. And so basically they specialize in selling bikes. So my thought was, well, can't I use that data to try to figure out a new area to, open up a business? And then can I correlate that data with foot traffic so that I can understand, the foot traffic in the area, and also correlate it with risk? If I'm going to open up in a coastal area, is there any flooding, over the next 5, 10, or 15 years that I should be aware of? And then I'm going to kind of pivot over to, if I was in the risk business or insurance business, how would I also look at those same data sets? So essentially what I've done is I started off here. If you look, this is of course Excel. Everybody's, probably pretty familiar with that. And if you look on the right-hand side here, all the data that I showed you in between S3 buckets, between my enterprise data, is all available to me right here in Excel. I didn't have to do a single thing. I never had to model, never had to wait for anybody to SQL. If you connect into the Foursquare data that we're going to provide after the webinar here, you can just go and start doing analysis immediately. And so what I've done is something pretty simple. I just quickly looked at cells over my different states, and it appears that most of my cells are out of California. So I think I'm going to stick with just opening up a store out in that area. Also just going to look, as cells start to tick up, that's what I'm gonna. It's a good time to go ahead and open a store. And again, this is probably a finance user, someone that's in Excel that's making decisions on, is it the right time to do something within my business? So once I've done that, maybe as like the CEO, I'm going to go look at my dashboards and make sure those things are accurate. So these are my cells. But again, if you, if I just pop back to one of the individual sheets here, you can see on the left-hand side, if I came in a Tableau, once again, everything's just available to me. I never had to come down in a data source. I never had to model anything. I never had to call anybody. I never had to wait for someone to engineer it and bring data together. And I'm getting the same exact answers back than the finance person, received through Excel. So we're both making the same decisions. I'm gonna snap back to my dashboard here. And again, I think, we focus, most of the cells are out of California. Actually, if I just go back to all here, we'll see that I'm selling up and down the West Coast, but I'm gonna go ahead and focus on California. And so as my dashboard says, this is a good area, and I have pretty good sales. So I'm actually gonna go focus on actually opening a store down here in San Diego type of area. And so with that, what I'll do is I'm going to, before I make any more investment here, I just brought on a data science team, and maybe I want that data science team to go in and really start to peel back the onion of the data, understand the risk associated with it, look at the point of interest data that we've acquired from Foursquare, and try to predict what foot traffic's going to be. So I just want to make one more, really intelligent decision before I move forward and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly move over to my data scientist, and likely maybe they're using something like a Jupyter notebook, and they've gone in and they basically just jumped in and logged into that same model, and they're now able to consume this data too. So the theme here is that use the tool that you want, get a consistent set of answers. And you don't need to wait for data engineering. You don't need to be a SQL guru. You don't need to be an ETL pipeline guru. Just consume the data. And I'll kind of go through this kind of fast, as the point here wasn't to spend a bunch of time in a notebook. But once you're inside this notebook, you can start to pull out different features and categorical information. But again, this is related to the same thing that you saw in Excel and the same thing that you saw within Tableau. And once I have that, I can easily go get that data without writing any SQL, worrying about S3 files, worrying about joins. Once I have that data, I can do some analysis, start to understand correlations. So this is actually the flood zone data that we brought in, that we combined with Foursquare data and with our first party data, excuse me. And you can actually see most of the flooding is coastal area. And, I should probably pay attention here is because, California's got pretty high, risk to value. And, basically the number of homes in California here is 27,000 homes that are at risk. So I'm going to drill down into that a little bit more, and I'm going to start to look at my POI data. So now I've gone out and I've grabbed some POI data, and I'm starting to look at, across the different categories. So what Jackie mentioned earlier is you can look at, high level categories, and you can drill down into like subcategories all the way down into restaurant types, for example. So if you're trying to think about where I want to open up a restaurant, or if I want to find things that, if there's other competition in the area, it's really easy to do that, and building visualizations here. And then I'm going to move on to time series. What most companies are doing to some degree today with regressions and classifications is really time series predictions. So maybe they're using something like Data Robot or H2O or Amazon's AutoML capability. And they're going out and they're trying to make a prediction with that. So, before you do that, you really need to think about time series in general. But the important concept here is that if every single person across those different tools are redefining what a hierarchy is and time hierarchy, I can guarantee they're going to be getting different answers. So you've got to wait for people to build pipelines and SQL views and consistency. With the at-scale model, you just have that from day one. You tap right in, you can start doing time series type of analysis, and this is the particular area. What I have done is start to drill down into the particular into California at this point and looking at the data. And then I'm going to start to kind of look at the different categories. And at this point, I've actually chosen where I want to open up a store. So I'm going to open up a store in I always get the name a little bit wrong here. Carpinteria, California.
Carpinteria.
So pretty cool. Carpinteria, every time. All right, so so basically, I'm kind of focused in on that particular area. One of the things that stuck out to me is, there's a lot of, the dwell time for February 20th is pretty significant. And we can see that's at sporting and recreational. So, I just go out and take a look and see what's going on. And that particular day, basically youth sports started again. And everybody was out and about. And there was a bunch of different track and field, tennis, softball, and a lot of different things going on. So just great to kind of see people trying to get back to normal. And that in general also gives me a good feeling of, hey, this is probably a good time to start to invest as we're seeing people get out there. Of course, you can do more detailed type of analysis. At that point, I'm going to quickly build a time series data frame, and there's a whole discussion that we could go into about that. But essentially, I'm going to go down and I'm going to make a prediction. And these are basically my predicted visits versus my daily visits. So I'm testing my algorithm to make sure that it's accurate here. So now I can actually go out and predict foot traffic. And so this is going to help me figure out, first of all, where I want to open. Maybe I want to open close to dining and drinking. Obviously during the weekends, this is going to be the best time for I'm going to get the best foot traffic and so on and so forth. But the point here is, a data scientist, I didn't have to do any data engineering. I didn't have to do any, wait for someone else to build me a pipeline. It was just available to me, the same as it was available to the finance folks, same as available to the CEO through his dashboards. And then you can make a decision. Kind of flipping the bid a little bit, let's think about it from a risk engineer or an insurance agent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, as a risk agent, in the insurance business, I'm going to start looking at the same data. I'm looking at Foursquare's point of interest data. I don't necessarily have access to the first party data of a particular customer, but I have a really rich data set in the Foursquare data. And, I can start to look at risk over time of coastal flooding. And you can see that New Jersey, followed by Florida, is a total value at risk. You can look to see that there's actually, we have a little bit of a drop, but then, as we move towards that 15-year flooding, there's a really steep increase. I can break that down by different states, by the number of homes at risk, Florida being the most. And then I can start to really also drill into kind of the point of interest data. So, as maybe, I called and said, hey, I'm looking to open a bike store in this particular zip code, and I'd like to understand my risk and insurance, so maybe I'm going to drill down and look in those areas. And again, I can look at the point of interest data from SafeGraph. I didn't have to do any modeling. I didn't have to worry. It doesn't matter if the data's in S3. It doesn't matter where it's at. To me, it's analysis ready immediately. And now I'm using Power BI, for example, and these are all live connections right into the data. Before I move on, I'm going to do a little bit more around the data science side, but I love kind of pointing out this data set that we found here. But in 2021, so this data set is, I think, February of 2021, obviously we found that most people were dwelling, the dwell time was by polling place. Makes sense. We obviously, a lot of us were voting. The very next, which surprisingly enough, was volcano. So one, if you are in insurance, you probably want to look at that. Two, I just wonder if there's some type of correlation there, but I thought it was a really interesting data set. But again, once I get there, maybe as someone that's in risk, maybe I'm a data scientist that works for the particular insurance company. At this point, it's not as pretty as a notebook, but maybe I'm just in Python. And again, I just quickly consumed that model. I didn't have to write a single line of code. And now I'm going off and I'm pulling back different data sets. So I'm saying, give me, everything within the zip code that I like, and give me where I have outdoor seating. And so here's the different shops that come back. And, we talked a little bit about photos earlier. So, some of the things that I saw here, were, a bunch of different companies that were open, and you can actually also see the photos. So the actual photo links are in the Foursquare data. So you have the number of photos, the Foursquare, the actual photo links. You have tips. You have the textual information about the tips. So you can do, natural language processing there. You can try to figure out if someone is saying if something's dangerous or not. But I love the idea of the pictures here too, because what I found was, one of the a Rincon brewery, which I'm familiar with, and so what I did is I actually went and opened up one of these photos just to take a look. And you can actually see this is the location that they were looking to rent. So instead of that risk engineer going out and actually physically going to this location, they could actually start to find, visual, they can start to take a look at different pictures out there. Maybe they can find different risks. Another thing that's in the Foursquare data is different elevations. So you may see if someone has a deck and, what is the elevation, and you can also see is it within a flood area, and so on and so forth. And so, kind of the point here, you've seen a lot of different tools, and I think I've shown everything, so we can shift back if you want to. But I've shown a lot of different tools, all going in through the at-scale semantic model, tapping into the Amazon data exchange, tapping into the Foursquare data, bringing these data sets together. They're analysis ready immediately, and I'm able to use the tool of choice. And just a heads up before I turn it back over, we are going to make the Foursquare data available to anybody to consume using, our platform. And you'll be seeing, if you registered, you'll be seeing a link from my email address with some information about that.
Thanks, Daniel. So for us, that sort of wraps it up. If anybody has other questions that they want to send through to the group, please do that in the questions tab in your control panel. We'll start with a few that we've received already, and anybody who has an answer, feel free to chime in. The first is, what are you seeing that's changing in the data now that the US is opening post-COVID? So I can start. I mean, I think we all sort of alluded to some of the things that we've seen in the business dealings that we've had. I mentioned, I think, that we've published a blog post every week during 2020 and actually into 2021. There's been some key points of data that we've seen around the way that people are moving and the places that they're going. I think one of the funny but interesting, like Daniel mentioned, the volcanoes, but in March and April of 2020, foot traffic to liquor stores was up 25%. So that's pretty significant, but also not that surprising probably for most of us. We also saw foot traffic to gas stations and auto repair shops up all the way through the summer of 2020, leading us down the path of understanding that people were spending more time in their car, right? So if you're spending more time in your car, you need gas. You also might need some car repairs because you're taking these trips that you would normally take in a plane or on a train, but you're spending more time in your car or, driving around places to just get outside. We saw an increase in visits to parks and trails, and that actually remained elevated all the way through late fall of 2020. And when we compare that data to 2019 data of the same time frame, it's actually still elevated. So people are spending more and more time outside and kind of staying there, as well as seeing people, dining outside, restaurants making changes to their businesses, et cetera. Anybody else have feedback on that?
Yeah, we've seen the same thing, and just in the data itself, you can see, first of all, the one thing that I noticed, and I think generally speaking, it's pretty obvious, is that people are getting back out. People are going out, certainly spending a lot of time out in nature. So we've seen a lot of that, but also you can start to see traffic moving up around transportation systems and other things like that. So as you're making decisions about your business, there's a lot of really core correlations and patterns that we're seeing within the data as far as people getting back to normal, if you will.
Awesome. Daniel, do you have anything?
Well, I mean, in insurance, what we saw is actually fewer cars on the road. So it was interesting about your comment, Jackie. But, you would think that claims payouts would have dropped. But instead, because the roads were relatively empty, the industry believes, accidents actually were more severe and some of the claims payouts were even higher. And the belief is because the roads were relatively empty early in the pandemic, and unfortunately people were driving at higher speeds. So, a lot of interesting, unexpected observations, or at least, if not causation, correlations in the data in this kind of new world of operating in a pandemic.
Yes, we actually saw that too, and covered that in one of our blog posts, and found that part of the reason some of that was happening is that truck drivers were still on the road And because they were not used to open roads, they were used to more traffic, that potentially that was some of the cause for some of the more severe accidents that you're mentioning. Let's see, other questions. Where can I access this data? So Tony, you want to take that?
Sure. If you just go and search for AWS Data Exchange, you'll land on the page, and you can see right away, just click on the button and you'll see the data sets that are available. And also, on the landing page, there are directions on how you'd be able to subscribe to the data sources that you can find on the exchange.
Yes, and yeah, the Foursquare data is available through the Amazon Data Exchange. So thanks for that. Let's see, we got another one. Who is responsible for building the at-scale model? Daniel?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. So at-scale does most of all that work. So we pre-model out most of the known third-party and second-party data sets. And so, if you look at the technology itself, it allows you to snap data sets together, if you will. And so at-scale actually takes care of all that work. And it goes back to that the common theme there is that the data is analysis ready. So when you're ready to analyze the Foursquare data, when you're ready to pull in different data sets from the data exchange, the data is just ready for you and available to log in using the tool of your choice.
And then Daniel, while we have you, we had another question. Could you throw some light on the term semantic layer?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our concept of a semantic layer, because you could probably find different definitions of it, is really kind of the core building blocks of business definitions. So it's where you define your KPIs, your measures, your quantitative values. So like total sales, total number of visits, average dwell time. And it's also where you define your dimensionality. So every single company has a concept of dimensionality. So it's, who's, what's, when's, how's, time, geo. So that's, where you can define that within the at-scale semantic model, and along with hierarchies. And we expose all that through endpoints that you can just connect in with whatever tool. And so the semantic model to us is the tool that allows you to build that flywheel that we talked about earlier, and essentially, build analytics back in, easily consume data. And that's at-scale's notion of a semantic model.
Awesome. I think I have one more for you. Can you provide some more info around at-scale capability with real-time data analytics?
Yeah, great question. So it really depends on what your definition of real-time is. So, the data that currently we're reading that from Foursquare, we're simply picking it up as it's updated. So, whatever interval that happens to be, that's when we're picking that data up. But we have customers that are updating, their data sets every 4 or 5 minutes. Typically, when you're doing, dimensional type of analysis, you're not necessarily doing that, sub-second type of, off-the-wire SLAs. But it just really depends on what the interval of the data updates are.
Perfect. And then the last one we have is, can you share again the fastest way to get started with this data? I think we've kind of all talked about it in terms of our presentations where the data is available, but we can also send a follow-up email to everybody who's participated today to talk a little bit more in depth about accessing the data or how to connect with the folks that we're hosting today. So again, hosted today by Foursquare, at-scale, and Amazon. Our contact information is on the screen. I think that this has been a great session today. I want to thank everybody for participating. We know you're busy, and we appreciate you taking time out of your very busy days to spend some time with us. Our contact information is up on the screen in case you want to reach out and get in touch. We will be sending follow-up emails, so the presentation will be available via that email, as well as all of the contact information that you see on screen. So with that, we don't have any more questions, and I'm going to go ahead and let everybody get back to their day. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.